Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Let's get ready for another long and boring video from Comrade Sergey, who was born in the USSR. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about Soviet rubles and American dollars, and how Soviet people can purchase those and exchange them in the Soviet Union. You see, officially, Soviet ruble was way stronger than American dollar. You could purchase $100 for 63 rubles, so rate of exchange was 63 kopecks for $1 American dollar. And that information was published regularly in the Soviet newspapers, and a lot of Soviet people, including me, felt a lot of pride looking at that numbers. How strong was the Soviet ruble? I'm not proud anymore, but a lot of people still do. There's still a lot of people back in Russia, mostly Russia, some people in Belarus, some in Ukraine and other former Soviet republics that miss badly Soviet Union. They miss the most delicious ice cream. They miss strong Soviet ruble. They miss strong government, strong country, and all the other good things that Soviet Union provided. So before we talk about rubles and dollars, let's learn a couple of Soviet words that you need to know, because if you meet someone, like you call them tankies, so the people that big fans of Comrade Stalin, we have a special terms for people who really miss Soviet Union. So the first word, and I mind you, not Russian word, it's Soviet word, is savok, and it's an interesting word. So savok is actually a Russian word that means dustpan, or it means like a small sand scooper. So when the kids play in a sandbox, they have these little scoopers. That's savok or savochek. Or if you clean the house and you sweep the dirt, then you use savok, like a dustpan, to pick up dirt. So savok, that's the original meaning, is a dustpan or sand scooper. But sometimes in the 80s, I would say probably mid-80s to late 80s, the word savok got a new meaning, and then meant Soviet Union. So you kind of hear it sounds savok, Soviet Union. Or actually it means people, like Soviet people who live in the Soviet Union, and the ones that like real, like hardcore Soviet. So you call them also Savki, the way they act, the way they behave at work, at home. So that's a kind of dual meaning term. A country, Soviet country, Savok, and also person that lives in Savok is also Savok. And you know, I use that term a lot, but I never thought about its origins. So actually I tried to look it up, and what I found, one of the versions that there's a famous Soviet and then Russian singer, Alexander Gradsky. He claims that he was the one who came up with the term savok. And what happened, him and his buddies were drinking, well, surprise, surprise there. And if you listen to my stories about vodka and how they split in 3 people so they don't get too drunk. So they had a bottle of alcohol, but they had no glasses. So they were looking for some kind of stuff to pour alcohol in. All they saw was toys left by some kid at the sandbox. So they just kind of tried to clean them up. And Alexander Gradsky, what he got was the little sand scooper. So he kind of exclaimed, man, my life is always savok. So even he had to drink out of this little sand scooper. And he claims after that word picked up. And that's how we got this term savok for lifestyle, Soviet lifestyle, for the Soviet country and for its people. Another versions that the word savok originated in Baltic states, because they called Russians that came and Soviets, they called them Sovietsky okkupanty, Soviet occupants. So they occupied the Baltic states. So Soviet, SOV, occupant, Sovok. So that's another theory of origins of the word savok. Which brings us to the second Soviet word, and actually this one probably was created later after the collapse of Soviet Union. and it's sovkadrocher. It's actually quite a rude word because drocher, that's they name people who do a lot of masturbations. So sovkadrocher, so that's the person that masturbates and thinking about Soviet Union, thinking about Savok. So if somebody constantly complains and says, oh, I wish Soviet Union was back, my life was so great in Soviet Union, please return Soviet Union. A lot of people refer to them like they are sovkadrochery. They are people that constantly masturbate thinking about Soviet Union. So those two words today, Savok is sovkadrocher. And now back to the topic of the Soviet ruble. So the question how it was determined that 63 Soviet kopecks are equal to $1 American dollar. Well, we need to go all the way back to the February of 1950 when, by the orders of Comrade Stalin, the Central Department of Statistics of the USSR had to recalculate the rate of exchange rate for the after the war ruble. And Comrade Stalin, of course, wasn't hiding his desire to show that Soviet ruble was strong and show high rate of exchange for the Soviet currency. So how do you usually compare apples to apples or rubles to dollars, right? You basically need to put together a consumer basket. So you get like clothing, shoes, hats, and so on. So you take comparable items in America and comparable items in Soviet Union, add up their cost, and then this is how you find the rate of exchange. So keeping in mind that Comrade Stalin really wanted a nice rate of exchange to show how strong the socialist money is, Soviet bean counters were really stretching as much as they could. So for the clothing, they picked very expensive, nice American palto, they call it coat, and then they said it's the same as the Soviet Red Army like surplus coat. Then same nice shoes from America and basic shoes in Soviet Union, which even not wearing boots, it was those kirzove sapagi. And same with hats. So they really picked the nicest items in America towards the cheapest, most basic goods in Soviet Union. Then, to be fair, Soviet bean counters considered that Soviet goods are way better quality and they're gonna last longer. So they added another 15% to this cost of the consumer basket, and they come up with 14 rubles for $1. But guess what? Comrade Stalin didn't like that number. So he crossed out 1 and wrote 4 rubles. So he made the rate of exchange much stronger. A little bit later, in 1961, the Soviet Union had a money denomination. So for every old 10 Soviet rubles, citizens got 1 new ruble. So, talking that Soviet Union never had inflation, but there's a quite example that there was quite inflation and they decided to cut down on the volume of the rubles. So they changed the money. And of course, there were some rules. They tried to find who had too much cash because they set up limits how much money you can convert from old rubles to new rubles. So anyway, so that's how 4 rubles became 40 kopecks, and eventually the rate of exchange was 63 kopecks for every dollar. So we have a super strong ruble, but do you think you could just take your rubles, go to the local bank, or as we call it Sberbank in the USSR, and exchange your rubles for dollars? Of course not. Free circulation of foreign currency was outlawed in Soviet Union, and actually was a pretty strict punishment for trading or even having dollars. Like you could get from 3 to 15 years in jail for owning American dollars, and if it's in big, large quantities, that you could get actually executed for that. So some sources saying 63 kopecks, some sources say 67 kopecks, but we actually had a joke says in the Soviet Union for $1 you could get 67 kopecks or from 3 to 15 years or execution. So you had three options in the Soviet Union for $1. 67 kopecks, 3 to 15 years in prison, or execution. Quite a choice. So as I mentioned in my previous video about Soviet tourism, the only way you could purchase American dollars if you are a tourist that heading out to Europe or Africa, whatever, then you had the right to purchase at this special rate. You could buy a little bit over $30. So you spend 20 rubles, you get a little bit over $30, and that's it. That's your limit. Otherwise, if they catch you with more dollars in your pocket than $32, you can get in serious trouble. You can get jail time, and so it won't be pretty. But, people are people. And I bet a lot of foreign tourists that came to the Soviet Union, they weren't happy with official rate of exchange. So they were trying to sell their dollars for more money if it's possible. And there were young people hanging out by the hotels or popular places where the foreign tourists go, like in Moscow, Leningrad, and they will try to buy dollars or Deutschmarks or British pounds of the tourists for maybe give them, 1 ruble for $1 or ruble 50 for $1, and then they're going to resell it to anyone who's going to travel to Europe and he wants to have more dollars. Then it will sell them, and the rate of exchange was, depending on the time and the place, it could be from 4 to 5 rubles for $1 all the way to 8 to 10 rubles for $1. So official rate of exchange was 0.6 rubles for dollar. Real was 10 times or higher. Of course, for some foreigners that came to Soviet Union on a regular basis for work or diplomatic work, whatever, they figure out that it was even better way of making extra buck is to bring in specific goods to the Soviet Union, not dollars, but specific goods, sell them, then use Russian Soviet rubles to purchase specific goods again, like black caviar or some antique items, and then bring them back and resell again. And that was the best way of making extra dollar. You bring a couple of pairs of Levi jeans, so people would wear maybe 2-3 pairs on them, because there was a limit how much clothing you can bring with you to Soviet Union. Then you strip, you take those on the street, sell to young guys, so-called fartsovshiki, who were hanging out by the hotels, ready to buy your goods. And then you use those rubles to buy black caviar, for example. And I found this curious detail. So apparently smart traders, so the people that were trading currencies, and fartsovshiki, the people who were buying like jeans and other foreign goods to resell, they didn't keep their money in dollars. They kept them in Deutschmarks for some reason. Maybe there was some loophole in the law, but for the Deutschmarks, they couldn't get in much trouble as, for example, for dollar, and the rate of exchange was way more stable. So I guess the rate of the exchange for a dollar was moving up and down, and Deutschmark was just stable and safe. So there's your story about strong Soviet dollar. Market forces found the real value of the Soviet ruble, even in the conditions of the government-controlled economy. And the reality is that one Soviet ruble was 10 times weaker than American dollar, although on every newspaper they probably show that for every 63 kopecks you can buy $1, but you couldn't because it was illegal. Well, I hope you learned something new today and enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. Hey, by the way, the cool merch for cool comrades is available at the Ushanka store at teespring.com. And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet Union.